Hey, if you like what you see, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that noti bell because it really helps out. When the annals of rock and metal history are cracked open, few names resonate with as much seismic force and mythic reverence as Ozzy Osbourne. His name isn't just a footnote in the story of heavy metal, it is the beginning of that story, etched in the foundations like a primal scream echoing through generations. Born in Birmingham, England, into working class adversity, John Michael Ozzy Osbourne didn't just rise from obscurity, he shattered the silence of post-industrial England with a voice that redefined an entire genre. With Black Sabbath, he birthed a sound darker, heavier, and more ominous than anything the world had ever heard. Together with Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward, Ozzy would help unleash a sonic reckoning upon the music world, creating a style that embraced darkness not just as a gimmick, but as a raw, emotional truth. The chilling riffs, the gloomy aesthetic, and the doomy atmosphere weren't accidents, they were reflections of the harsh reality of working class life, turned into art by a frontman who could howl anguish into poetry and madness into melody. But what elevates Ozzy Osbourne above being a simple frontman to a genre-defining band leader is the fact that his legacy didn't end when he was kicked out of Black Sabbath, it expanded. Where others might have vanished into obscurity, Ozzy launched a solo career that would not only revitalize his image, but redefine what it meant to be a metal icon in the modern era. With the help of young guitar prodigy Randy Rhoads, Ozzy reinvented himself as a solo artist capable of pushing musical and theatrical boundaries, blending virtuistic musicianship with demonic flair. From Crazy Train to Mr. Crowley, Ozzy crafted a catalogue that was both explosive and enduring. Even as trends shifted and bands came and went, he stood firm, an outlandish, unpredictable yet strangely endearing figure of chaos and brilliance. His antics, both onstage and offstage, were the stuff of tabloid legends, but beneath the headlines was always a man committed to the spirit of metal, freedom, rebellion, pain, and transcendence. In this video, I will delve into the career, influence, and persona of Ozzy Osbourne, not just as the founding voice of Black Sabbath, but not just as the madman behind the groundbreaking solo career, but as a cultural icon who helped shape the identity of an entire movement. From the early Sabbath records that turned gloom into gold, to the soaring heights and tragic lows of his solo career, and even into the late-stage resurgence of his work and public image, I will explore what it is that makes Ozzy more than just a man or a musician. He is a symbol of survival in the face of addiction, of relevance in an ever-changing musical landscape, and of an unfiltered authenticity in a world increasingly obsessed with polish and perfection. He is not just the godfather of metal because he was first, he is the godfather because he never left, because he never stopped, and because he's always represented the heart and soul of the genre. Ozzy Osbourne is a living paradox, the Prince of Darkness with a contagious laugh, the wild rock star who became a surprisingly wholesome reality TV dad, the metal legend who still sells out arenas decades after his first note was screamed into a microphone. In a world where fame is fleeting and the spotlight fickle, Ozzy has maintained not only his visibility but his myth. His story is one of triumph over tragedy, chaos woven into greatness, and an unwavering commitment to the sound that changed the world. This essay isn't just a tribute, it is an in-depth celebration and examination of why Ozzy Osbourne remains and will always be the undying, unshakable godfather of metal. Ozzy Osbourne's story begins in Ashton, a working-class suburb of Birmingham, England, a place defined by soot-covered bricks, steelworks, and the rhythmic clang of industrial life. Born on December 3rd, 1948, as John Michael Osbourne, Ozzy grew up in a two-bedroom house shared with his parents and 5 siblings. His father, Jack Osbourne, worked night shifts as a toolmaker, while his mother, Lillian, was employed at a car parts factory. The family lived together, often scraping by on the bare minimum, and the bleak post-war environment they endured was no small influence on the emotional terrain of Ozzy's future music. Birmingham was not a place of opportunity or artistic flourishing, it was a city burdened by the smoke of factories and the weight of limited prospects. For young Ozzy, who struggled with dyslexia and never quite found a niche in school, life felt constrained, grey, and claustrophobic. The brutal realities of poverty, coupled with the emotional turbulence of his surroundings, would later manifest in the doomy, ominous tone of his music. Music that screamed not just for attention, but for release. Long before the screaming crowds and the stage dives, Ozzy was just another misfit in a forgotten corner of England, bouncing between jobs and even spending a brief stint in prison for petty theft. But despite these setbacks, music offered a kind of salvation for Ozzy. Inspired by the Beatles, particularly Paul McCartney, Ozzy began to believe in the impossible, that music could be a ticket out of the monotony, a tool for reinvention. It was this hunger for something more, this need to transform suffering into sound, that eventually led Ozzy to cross paths with guitarist Tony Iommi, bassist Geezer Butler, and drummer Bill Ward. At first, they called themselves Earth, playing blues rock in local pubs, trying to make ends meet while dreaming of something bigger. But as they began to lean into heavier, darker sounds that felt more true to their collective experiences, a new name and a new identity began to take shape. Inspired by a horror movie marquee, they rechristened themselves into Black Sabbath, and in doing so, birthed not just a band, but an entire genre. The creation of Black Sabbath in 1968 wasn't just a musical event, it was a cultural earthquake. The band's debut self-titled album, released in 1970, opened with a rumbling thunderstorm and the tolling of a church bell, followed by a tritone riff, also known as the Devil's Interval. That sounded like a portal to hell itself had been opened. Ozzy's vocals weren't polished or restrained, they were tortured, frantic, ominous, and utterly complex and real. He wasn't performing a role, he was exorcising demons, both personal and generational. The lyrics, often drawing from themes of war, death, religion and madness, didn't glorify evil, they reflected the fears and anxiety of people that lived with everyday demons, particularly in the grim, post-industrial climate of England. It was music for the disillusioned, for the spiritually exhausted, for those looking to scream back at the void. And at the center of it all was Ozzy, equal parts prophet and madman, whose voice captured the sound of existential dread with unnerving precision. What followed was a streak of genre-defining records that not only secured Black Sabbath's status as the godfathers of metal, but also carved Ozzy Osbourne's name into music history. Albums like Paranoid, Master of Reality, and Volume 4 weren't just popular, they were revolutionary. They slowed down rock's tempo, detuned its guitars, and gave it a weight it had never carried before. While others sang about love and rebellion, Ozzy and Sabbath sang about insanity, doom, and the inescapable spectre of death. And yet, despite the darkness, it wasn't nihilism. It wasn't nihilism they were selling, it was catharsis. Their music offered a kind of brutal honesty that fans had never heard before, and Ozzy's haunting wails were the conduit through which this darkness was made into something beautiful. From the grime of Birmingham to the stages of the world, Ozzy had not only found his escape, he had become the voice of the lost, the broken, and the damned, and it was only just the beginning. Ozzy Osbourne's legacy cannot be separated from the monumental catalogue of music he has unleashed upon the world, a body of work that spans over 5 decades and continues to resonate with thunderous power. It all began with Paranoid, 1970, Black Sabbath's genre-defining masterpiece, an album that took the burgeoning essence of heavy metal and gave it not only form, but fire. Songs like War Pigs, Iron Man, and the title track Paranoid weren't just heavy, they were apocalyptic. War Pigs wasn't just a protest song, it was a scathing indictment of the military-industrial complex, carried by Tony Iommi's colossal riffs and Ozzy's searing vocals, which danced between fury and despondency with unsettling ease. Iron Man, meanwhile, became one of the most recognizable songs in metal history, driven by its lumbering, iconic riff and Ozzy's almost narratively tragic voice, telling the tale of a man turned to metal, shunned by society. But it was Paranoid, the accidental anthem written in minutes as filler, that truly exploded. Its galloping pace and unforgettable hook cemented Ozzy not only as a vocalist, but as a voice of the genre itself. With just one album, the band, and Ozzy at its core, had created a blueprint that would influence generations of musicians. Yet what's extraordinary is that Ozzy didn't allow his legacy to calcify in those early triumphs. As his time with Black Sabbath ended, a new chapter, perhaps an even more astonishing one, began with his solo career. After being fired from Sabbath in 1979, many assumed he would disappear into the black hole of addiction and irrelevance. But Ozzy defied those expectations with Blizzard of Oz, an album that not only saved his career, but elevated him to god-tier status. Featuring instant classics like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley, Ozzy fused theatrical flair with blistering musicianship, largely thanks to the jaw-dropping talents of guitarist Randy Rhoads. Crazy Train remains a staple not only of just heavy metal, but of rock music as a whole, its opening riff as Ozzy's unmistakable cry. Mr. Crowley merged gothic atmosphere with soaring neoclassical solos, elevating the occult mystique that had always lingered in Ozzy's aesthetic into high art. From there, albums like Diary of a Madman, Bark at the Moon, and No More Tears only further entrenched him as a solo powerhouse, each spawning its own enduring hits, from the haunting title track of Diary to the snarling guitar work of Bark at the Moon, to the heart-wrenching drama of Mama I'm Coming Home. Across each single decade, Ozzy has consistently delivered music that transcends its era, songs that are not only popular but permanently etched into the DNA of both metal and rock. Even during the shifting tides of the 90s and the 2000s, when many classic rockers faded into the background or leaned heavily into nostalgia tours, Ozzy pushed forward. He remained creative, never content to simply rest on the laurels of past glories. Albums like Osmosis and Down to Earth may have divided critics, but they still offered bangers like Perry Mason and Gets Me Through, proving that Ozzy could evolve while maintaining the gritty emotional core that always defined his music. And even when his voice aged, when his performances became more deliberate, the fire within him never flickered. It only burned differently, older, wiser, and somehow more affecting. He was no longer just the wild man of metal, he became its elder statesman, a living monument who could still summon thunder at will. Then in 2022, against all odds, Ozzy released what may go down as one of the most poignant albums of his entire career, Patient Number 9. This album, created while his health had declined and the spectre of Parkinson's had loomed over him, the album is nothing short of a triumph, featuring a staggering lineup of guest guitarists, Eric Clapton, Zakk Wylde, Jeff Beck, Tony Iommi, and more. Patient Number 9 is a beautiful, crushing, and deeply human record. The title track, with its eerie elegance and tortured lyrics, finds Ozzy reflecting on his mortality with unflinching honesty. It's not a scream into the void like his earlier and younger songs, but a whisper to the grave, a reminder that even the Prince of Darkness is not immortal, but his music just might be. Songs like Degradation Rules, featuring Iommi, reunite the Sabbath spirit with modern production. Meanwhile, tracks like No Escape From Now and Dead and Gone blend vulnerability with vintage riffage, proving that even near the end of his physical road, Ozzy could still roar like the legends of old. Patient Number 9 isn't just another album, it is a true honest statement. It's proof that Ozzy Osbourne, through every reinvention and resurrection, will continue to defy the rules of time and trend. His hits are not just songs, they are chapters in the metal gospel, and he is its eternal preacher. When Ozzy Osbourne publicly revealed in early 2020 that he had been diagnosed with a rare form of Parkinson's disease known as PRKN2, it shook fans across the globe. The godfather of metal, once known for his chaotic energy, wild antics, and animalistic presence on stage, was now facing an unforgiving degenerative illness. And yet, even in the shadow of Parkinson's, Ozzy refused to go quietly. He didn't mask the truth, nor did he hide from it. Instead, he confronted it head-on, choosing transparency over silence and strength over surrender. His admission wasn't a sign of defeat. It was an act of rebellion against the image of frailty the disease often conjures in our minds. At a time when many would have taken a step back, Ozzy stood in the public eye and said, in so many words, "I'm not done yet." In interviews following the diagnosis, he acknowledged the challenges he was facing: constant pain, mobility issues, and the frustration of having a body that no longer obeyed him like it used to. But just as he's always done, Ozzy turned pain into purpose. This wasn't the end of a legendary career, it was a new era of unfiltered honesty and undying perseverance. Despite the devastating diagnosis, Ozzy remained musically active, and the result was nothing short of astonishing. Just 2 years after announcing his condition in 2022, he released the aforementioned Patient Number 9, an album that can only be described as a miracle born from struggle. Most wouldn't ever expect a man wrestling with a debilitating disease to craft a full-length album filled with blistering solos, thunderous riffs, and lyrics dripping with raw emotion. But Ozzy once again defied the expectations with the same grit and theatrical flair that made him famous in the first place. Collaborating with some of rock and metal's most legendary guitarists, he managed to fuse old-school grandeur with new-age vulnerability. More than just a collection of tracks, Patient Number 9 is a testament to the human spirit's refusal to be caged. It's the sound of a man staring into the abyss, aware or unaware of what lies ahead, and choosing to scream into it rather than retreat into the shadows. Songs like Nothing Feels Right and Immortal are rich with subtext, odes to a body in rebellion and a legacy that refuses to die. Ozzy's voice, though aged, carries more soul than ever before, proof that emotion isn't bound to pitch or to clarity, it's bound to truth, and few artists have ever conveyed that truth as starkly as Ozzy does here. Even as his body declined further, Ozzy stayed in the spotlight in ways both grand and surprising. One of the most unforgettable moments came during the closing ceremony of the 2022 Commonwealth Games in his hometown of Birmingham. With metal plates in his spine and Parkinson's tightening its grip, Ozzy took to the stage with Black Sabbath bandmate Tony Iommi and delivered a roaring rendition of Paranoid that electrified the crowd and instantly went viral. Watching Ozzy belt out the song that helped launch metal into the stratosphere of legend, backed by Iommi's thunderous guitar, was more than just nostalgia, it was defiance incarnate. His performance was both a victory lap and a bold reminder. The Prince of Darkness still had fight left in him, and it wasn't just music where he left his mark during this period. He continued to speak publicly about Parkinson's, breaking the silence around a disease often misunderstood and stigmatized. Ozzy became an unlikely face of resilience, not just for metalheads like myself, but for anyone facing health battles. His honesty, laced with humor and unshakable determination, served as an inspiration to millions who saw in him a reflection of their own fight. In the years following Patient Number 9, Ozzy has remained creatively restless, continuing to hint at new material and never fully closing the door on live performances. Even as surgeries and hospital stays have tested him time and time again, he has formally announced in early 23 that he was stepping away from touring due to physical toll. He never outruled performing again in some capacity. He's since been featured in numerous interviews, podcasts and video appearances with that same devilish charm, talking not only about music, but about mortality, purpose, and legacy. In 23 and 24, he continued to work behind the scenes, appearing on tracks by other artists like Post Malone, overseeing reissues of classic albums, and strengthening the Osbourne brand that he and his family had built through the decades of reality television and cultural relevance. In a world that so often forgets its legends, Ozzy has ensured that his legacy remains a living one. He hasn't faded, he hasn't disappeared, and even if he never sings on stage again, his presence looms just as large, proving that Ozzy Osbourne, Parkinson's and all, is still the unkillable godfather of metal. No illness, no matter how insidious and life-threatening, can dim the light of someone who has already etched his soul into the very sound of rebellion itself. Ozzy Osbourne isn't merely a heavy metal icon, he is the molten core from which the genre exploded into being. From his working class roots in Aston, Birmingham, to the stages of the world where he'd howl into eternity, Ozzy's journey has never been about perfection, it's been about truth, grit, and refusing to be silenced. He didn't just invent a random sound, he gave metal its very soul. His voice, unmistakable and haunting, became the anthem for generations of misfits, rebels and outsiders who found in his howls a kindred spirit. Whether he was screaming with Black Sabbath about the horrors of war and madness, or delivering heartbreak and inner torment in his solo work, Ozzy was always more than just a performer, he was real. Every flaw, every stumble, every triumphant rise and devastating fall was laid bare, and through that raw honesty, he became more than a man, he became a movement. Even as time has tried to wear him down through addiction, illness, public scrutiny, and Parkinson's disease, Ozzy has endured like some unholy force of nature that refuses to be buried. He has transformed again and again, not into someone new, but into a stronger, wiser version of the madman we all fell in love with. Whether releasing new music from a hospital bed or standing tall at the Commonwealth Games with bolts in his spine, Ozzy has continued to scream into the dark, reminding the world that heavy metal doesn't die, it evolves. And in doing so, he has shown us, his fans, that strength isn't just found in loud guitars and chaos, but in the quiet resolve to never give up. His discography is now a sacred scripture, studied and worshipped by new generations who weren't even born when Paranoid first blew out speakers, and yet they still scream the lyrics with blood-pumping devotion. Why? Because legends like Ozzy Osbourne don't age, they simply ignite. So as we end this video essay and reflect on the madness, the music, and the meaning of it all, we offer more than just applause. We offer our eternal gratitude. Thank you, Ozzy, for showing us that it's okay to be broken, it's okay to be loud, and it's okay to fight like hell, even when the world says you're finished. Thank you for the music, the chaos, the laughter, and the pain. You've been our sonic shepherd through the darkness, our crown-wearing lunatic who made the freaks feel like kings. You may never tour again, you may grow old, and your voice may tremble, but your impact will never die. You are, and forever will be, the eternal Prince of Darkness, the godfather of metal, and one of the greatest artists to ever walk this earth. Long live Ozzy Osbourne, our bat-biting, stage-conquering, heart-shredding legend.